The war between worlds had ended in silence, not in victory, not in defeat, just silence, the kind that trembled through the bones of those who had seen too much. When Captain Elias Ward stepped onto the crystalline soil of Aloria Prime, he carried more than a soldier's fatigue. He carried the ache of a human who had witnessed galaxies burn. The air shimmered with colors his eyes barely understood, yet the sadness in it felt universal. Before him stood Queen Seraphine of Aloria, tall, radiant, her silver hair flowing like liquid light. Her royal armor cracked at the edges, whispered of a battle she hadn't escaped unscathed, and beside her, trembling but proud, was Princess Lyra, her daughter, the last heir to an empire that once spanned 7 stars, human. The queen's voice trembled, firm, regal, yet laced with a desperation she could no longer hide. "Marry my daughter." Elias froze. Around him, the alien guards stiffened. The words echoed like a dream turned nightmare. "What did you say?" The queen took a breath. "Marry my daughter, Captain Ward. Bind your species to ours. Your courage ended a war that even our fleets could not. You saved my people, and if we are to survive the chaos that follows peace, Aloria must stand with humanity." He wanted to speak, to protest, to laugh at the absurdity of it, but Lyra's eyes met his. Large, luminous violet eyes filled not with fear, but with hope. "I don't need your pity," she whispered. "I just need your promise." Elias felt the weight of galaxies in those words. A soldier who had lost everything, being asked to rebuild everything. His silence stretched until even the queen's crown seemed to dim under it. "I'm just a man," he said finally. "Not a king. Not a savior." "You don't want me, you want what I represent," Queen Seraphine's voice broke. "No, Captain. I want what you are. When our armies faltered, your soldiers carried ours to safety. When your ships were torn apart, you still fought beside us. You are the first human who taught us the meaning of mercy." Lyra stepped forward, her delicate hand brushing his scarred palm. "And the first human I ever wanted to trust." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was trembling, alive, filled with the unspoken hum of fate shifting. Elias closed his eyes. He had faced death without flinching, but this was something else entirely. "I don't know your customs," he said slowly, "but if this is truly what your heart asks, not what your throne commands." Lyra's lips parted, her voice soft as light rain. "It is both." He smiled, a tired, wounded smile. "Then maybe the universe hasn't gone mad after all." The queen exhaled, a sound halfway between a sob and a sigh. Around them, the alien courtiers bowed as if history itself had been rewritten. But deep within the palace's shining halls, shadows stirred. Not all agreed with the human sitting beside the Alorian throne, and though Elias didn't yet know it, this strange proposal would ignite something far more dangerous than war. Hope. That night, as the twin moons of Aloria rose, the soldier sat alone in a chamber of living crystal. He gazed through its translucent walls, wondering not how the stars could burn so brightly, but whether a human heart could ever belong among them. And far beyond those same stars, on old Earth, the whispers had already begun. The alien queen wants her daughter to marry a human. The question echoed across worlds, and in that echo, destiny began to move. The next morning began with silence again, but it was not the silence of war. It was the quiet before something new began. Elias woke to the faint hum of the Alorian palace, its walls alive, breathing softly like some great sleeping creature. The air smelled of silver rain and distant blossoms. For the first time in years, he wasn't on a battlefield, yet his chest felt heavier than it ever had under armor. When the crystalline doors opened, Princess Lyra entered. She wasn't dressed in her royal attire this time. No crown, no armor, only a simple gown of soft white fabric that shimmered faintly with her movement. She looked almost human then. "Almost. You didn't sleep," she said quietly. Elias smiled faintly. Didn't need to. Old soldier habit. Lyra studied him for a long moment. "You think my mother's request is madness?" He didn't answer at first. He stood, moving to the window where the city of Aloria stretched below like a living galaxy. Bridges of light, rivers that glowed, towers that sang in the wind. "I think your mother's desperate," he said at last. "But not mad. Desperation makes us reach for strange things." Lyra stepped beside him. Do you think I'm one of those strange things?" Her tone was calm, but her eyes revealed the fragile truth beneath. She wasn't just a princess, she was a daughter caught between empire and heart. Elias turned to face her. "You're not strange, princess. You're brave, and that's rarer than beauty in any world." The words came out rough, unpolished, but they struck her deeper than she expected. Her lips parted slightly, then she looked away, her silver hair slipping over her shoulder like moonlight. "You're kind," she said softly. "Speak as though pain is a badge of honor. But I wonder, do you ever allow yourselves peace?" He looked down at his hands, at the scars etched across his knuckles. "Peace isn't given to us," he murmured. "We earn it, piece by piece, sometimes with blood, sometimes with kindness." Lyra's gaze lifted to his. "And what do you think my people are earning now?" "Maybe redemption," he said. "Maybe the right to begin again." A silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with meaning neither dared to name. Then a sound echoed from the grand corridor, metal boots, commanding voices. A court messenger burst in, bowing hastily. "Your Highness, the council demands audience." They refused to recognize this. "Union! They call it blasphemy!" Lyra's jaw tightened. "They forget who wears the crown." Elias stepped forward. "If they see me as a threat, I can leave. You don't need this political storm because of me." But Lyra turned sharply, her voice firm, almost royal again. "No. You are why they must see beyond their pride. If I hide you, they win. If I stand with you, they learn." Her conviction stunned him. For all her delicate grace, Lyra carried a steel heart beneath the silk. Elias bowed slightly. "Then I'll stand beside you, princess, even if your people hate me for it." Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Then we both have much to teach them about courage." When they entered the hall of the Star Council, hundreds of Aelorian nobles glared down from their radiant seats. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the chamber. One elder rose, his voice sharp as crystal. "A human cannot share our bloodline. You shame your ancestors, princess." But before Lyra could speak, Elias stepped forward. His voice, deep and calm, echoed across the hall. "I didn't come here to take your throne. I came because your queen asked for something impossible, and sometimes impossible things are worth trying for." The hall fell silent. Lyra looked at him, her eyes glistening with something unspoken, and for the first time, the alien court saw not a human soldier or a defeated enemy, but a man who spoke with a courage that shook their certainty. The queen's plan had begun to take root, but the seeds of change, as always, demanded sacrifice. Outside, the twin moons of Aeloria shone brighter that night, as if watching two hearts begin to beat in fragile, dangerous harmony. The next days moved like storms through the empire. Every hall of Aeloria buzzed with rumors. The queen's plea, the princess's defiance, and the strange human who dared to stand beside them. Some called Elias the savior of stars. Others called him the invader groom. But Elias himself called it something simpler: trouble. He stood alone on the balcony of the palace, watching the city glow beneath the alien twilight. Aeloria was breathtaking. Rivers of light curved through the air, and birds of glass wings soared above them, leaving trails of silver dust. Yet beneath its beauty, Elias could feel tension thickening like storm clouds. A voice stirred behind him. "You don't hide your unease very well." He turned to see Queen Seraphine walking toward him, her royal mantle flowing behind her like a comet's tail. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried exhaustion, the kind only rulers knew. "Your Majesty," Elias said, bowing slightly. "I've been told there's unrest among your people." "There is," she admitted. "They question my choice, my daughter's heart, and your worth. But they forget that the same human they doubt once shielded our wounded with his own body." She paused, studying him carefully. "Do you doubt your worth, Captain?" He looked down. "Every day. But I keep moving anyway." The Queen smiled faintly. "And that is courage. And courage is what this empire needs." Before he could respond, Lyra entered, no longer dressed as a princess but in the ceremonial armor of Aeloria's defenders. Her presence made the air itself tremble. "Mother," she said firmly, "the council plans to call a vote. They wish to strip our bloodline of legitimacy if we go through with this." Elias's brow furrowed. "You mean they'd overthrow you?" Lyra nodded. "If the union continues, they'll move against us." Quietly at first, then openly. Queen Seraphine's jaw tightened. "Let them try. Lyra turned to Elias. You see, this is not about politics anymore, it's about pride and fear. They'd rather burn what's left of our world than let it change. Elias crossed his arms. Then maybe it's time they remembered what change feels like. Lyra blinked. You sound almost like a revolutionary, Captain. He smiled slightly. Not a revolutionary, just someone who's tired of seeing good people crushed under tradition. That night the Queen called a private council. Only a handful of loyalists attended, those who still believed Eloria could stand with humanity. Maps and data projections hovered above the great crystal table, glowing with the threat of insurrection. Elias stood quietly, absorbing every word. His soldiers' instincts were alive again. This wasn't just diplomacy anymore, it was survival. Then unexpectedly a tremor shook the palace. The lights flickered, the holograms shattered. Outside the night flared red. Lyra turned sharply. What was that? A guard rushed in, his face pale. An explosion, Sector 9, the power gardens. Rebels, they're attacking the lower city. Without hesitation, Elias grabbed his weapon, a human-made rifle that looked oddly out of place amid the crystalline walls. I'm going. Lyra stepped forward. You're not going alone. The Queen's voice rang sharp. Lyra! But her daughter had already followed the human out into the corridor, armor blazing with light. The Queen closed her eyes. So it begins. The streets of Eloria were chaos when they arrived. The rebels wore the sigil of the old houses, wielding weapons powered by stolen energy cells. Flames of azure light cut across the air. Citizens fled in panic. Elias ducked behind a fallen archway. Lyra, left flank. She moved like lightning, her spear a beam of raw power. Together they fought as if they'd trained for years, each movement seamless. Elias covered her back. She shielded his front. And in that storm of light and smoke something changed. Trust turned into something stronger. When the last rebel fell, Lyra stood panting, her armor cracked, a streak of blood tracing her cheek. Elias reached out, brushing it away gently. You're hurt. Her breath trembled. You're reckless, he smiled. You started it. For a long moment, the city's glow reflected in her eyes, and neither spoke. Around them, silence returned, not peaceful but powerful. Then Lyra whispered, They'll come again. Stronger next time. Elias looked toward the distant horizon where faint embers rose like stars. Then we'll be ready, together. In that moment, beneath the fractured skies of an alien world, a soldier and a princess stood side by side, not out of duty, but choice. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew the truth. This was no longer just about an alliance. It was about the future of both their worlds. Eloria's capital city still smoked the next dawn. The fires from the rebellion had been extinguished, but their memory glowed like embers in the hearts of the people. And in the heart of the palace, the real fire, fear, was spreading faster than any flame. Queen Seraphine sat upon her throne, her posture regal yet weary. She looked older now, not in years but in the weight she carried. The council had gathered again, their jeweled robes glittering like poison under the pale light. Elias stood at the Queen's right hand. Lyra stood at her left. Their presence together in the throne room was itself a declaration and a challenge. Elorian Chancellor Varen, thin and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, the people are restless. They say the human's presence has cursed our peace. Already the outer houses have armed themselves. How much more blood must be spilled before you end this? Folly. The Queen's voice remained calm. The blood was spilled long before he came here, Chancellor. It was spilled by our pride, Varen sneered. And now you would shame the crown by wedding your daughter to a creature of flesh and iron? Before Seraphine could respond, Elias spoke, his voice quiet but cutting through the noise like steel through silk. I didn't ask for this, but your queen asked for peace, and I'm standing here because I believe she's right. You don't have to like me. You just have to stop trying to kill each other. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Lyra bit back a smile. Varen turned on him. Human, you speak boldly for one who breathes borrowed air. Elias met his gaze without flinching. And you speak cowardly for one who hides behind tradition. Lyra's voice broke the tension like a bell. Enough. The war taught us nothing if we still believe purity is worth more than compassion. My father died defending this empire's pride. I won't do the same. A silence fell so deep it seemed the palace itself held its breath. Then from the shadows another voice spoke. It was low, venomous. Then you are no true daughter of Aloria. The speaker stepped forward, General Kale, commander of the Royal Guard once loyal to the throne. His silver armor gleamed, but his eyes were dark with bitterness. You would throw away our legacy for this human's pity? Lyra stared at him, unblinking. Not for pity, General. For hope. Kale's hand tightened on his weapon. Hope doesn't rebuild empires. Power does. Before anyone could stop him, he drew his blade and struck, aiming not for Elias, but for the Queen. The world seemed to slow. Elias moved first. His body slammed into Seraphine, throwing her clear as the blade sliced through the air. Lyra screamed, her spear igniting, and met Kale's strike mid-swing. Sparks burst like stars. The throne room erupted into chaos. Guards rushed in, torn between duty and rebellion. Elias rolled to his feet, drawing his rifle. The weapon hummed, releasing a pulse of kinetic energy that shattered Kyle's armor plating. Lyra stood between the traitor and her mother, fury blazing in her violet eyes. You would attack your queen for the sake of your ego? Kale spat blood, for the sake of Aloria's soul. But Elias's next shot disarmed him. The guards restrained the general as he fell to his knees, defeated and silent. Queen Seraphine rose slowly, brushing dust from her gown. Her voice carried through the hall, soft but unbreakable. Let it be known, the human you despise just saved your queen's life. If this is weakness, then may we all be weak. No one dared speak. Later, as the halls emptied and the night returned, Lyra found Elias alone again on the balcony. His uniform was torn, his shoulder bleeding faintly. You could have died, she whispered. He gave a tired smile. Would have been a dramatic ending, don't you think? Lyra's eyes filled with unshed tears. Don't joke about that. Elias looked at her then, really looked. The princess who had defied a galaxy, who carried the hopes of her people on fragile shoulders. I didn't jump in front of her because she's a queen, he said quietly. I did it because she's your mother. For a moment the words hung between them, fragile and infinite. Lyra stepped closer, the starlight dancing across her face. Then you're not just human, she murmured. You're the kind of heart our world forgot how to believe in. And in the silence that followed, beneath twin moons and smoke-streaked skies, the first spark of something unspoken began to burn, something that could either heal a world or destroy it completely. For 3 days, the palace gates remained closed. The rebellion had been crushed, the traitors imprisoned, and Queen Seraphine's rule restored for now. But inside those shining walls, tension brewed like thunder behind calm skies. Elias found himself once again caught between two worlds. To the humans on the diplomatic channels back home, he was a symbol, the soldier who united with an alien heir. To the Alorians, he was a question they still hadn't answered, a human or a hope. He didn't know which truth frightened him more. Lyra met him in the gardens that evening. The Alorian gardens weren't made of soil but light, living vines that shimmered in patterns of thought and color. When Lyra walked through them, the vines leaned toward her, glowing softly, as though recognizing her heartbeat. You look like you haven't slept again, she said gently. Elias smirked. Maybe I'm afraid if I sleep I'll wake up and find all this was a hallucination. Lyra smiled faintly. If it is, then it's one we both share. They walked in silence for a while, the hum of alien birds echoing overhead. The war had left its mark on both of them, Elias in the scars across his hands, Lyra in the shadows beneath her eyes. Finally, she stopped near a pool of glowing water. My mother has decided, she said quietly. The ceremony will proceed. The alliance must be sealed publicly. Elias blinked. Already? After everything that's happened? Yes, Lyra said. Because of everything that's happened, he frowned. Lyra, you know what that means. Your people will see it as submission to humanity. My own people will call it propaganda. You'll be attacked again. Lyra met his gaze with quiet strength. I've already been attacked. I've already lost friends, soldiers, and faith. But I refuse to lose purpose. You once told me peace is earned piece by piece. Then let this be our peace. Her conviction left him silent. She wasn't naive anymore. She wasn't even the same princess he'd met weeks ago. There was something new in her, resolve carved from heartbreak. Do you love me? She asked suddenly. The question struck him harder than any explosion. He didn't answer right away. His breath caught. Her eyes searched his face, not for flattery, not for comfort, but truth. I don't know what love means between our worlds, he said finally. But I know that when you walk into a room, I forget to breathe. I know that when you fight, I believe again. If that's love, then yes, yes I do. Her lips trembled, and a single tear, bright as a droplet of starlight, fell down her cheek. She laughed softly, shakily. Then maybe the universe isn't so cruel after all. They stood there, two figures from two species, their hands finding each other without hesitation. Around them, the garden brightened as if the very world had chosen to bear witness. But as peace settled between them, the shadows beyond the palace began to move again. In the lower districts of Aloria, Chancellor Varen met with envoys cloaked in Earth's military insignia. Their faces were hidden, their voices cold. Your queen has lost to fantasy, Varen hissed. She'll hand our world to the humans in the name of peace. I offer you access to our quantum vaults. In return, you ensure the human captain never makes it to that wedding. The human envoy's smile was sharp as frost. You speak treason against your queen. Varen's voice turned venomous. I speak survival. A silent handshake sealed a deal darker than either world could afford. Back in the palace, Lyra and Elias stood watching the twin moons rise again. He could feel her hand tremble slightly in his. She wasn't afraid for herself, she was afraid for him. I know they'll come for us, she said softly. Elias nodded. Then we'll stand together when they do. Lyra's expression softened. You always say we as though you've forgotten you're just one man. He looked at her with quiet intensity. One man can change a war. Maybe he can change a world. For a long moment, the two of them stood beneath the moon, silent, strong, and fragile all at once. Neither saw the faint red glow flicker in the distance, the mark of a ship entering orbit unseen by the Aelorian guards. The storm hadn't ended. It had only found new fuel, and when it came, it would test not just their courage, but the very bond that had begun to bridge the stars. The day of the ceremony arrived like the calm before a tempest. Too still, too perfect, the kind of stillness that made a soldier's instincts ache. The palace was transformed. Towers of glass and crystal shimmered in cascading light, the air alive with music that seemed to ripple from the very walls. Thousands of Aelorians gathered beneath the floating bridges, their luminous robes a sea of shifting color. Above them, banners of both empires, Aloria's silver crest and Earth's blue insignia, fluttered side by side for the first time in history. Elias stood before the mirror, adjusting the ceremonial armor the Queen's attendants had forged for him. It was neither human nor alien, but something between, steel woven with living light. He barely recognized himself in the reflection. Lyra appeared behind him, radiant in her gown of starlit silk, her hair braided with threads of silver and soft flame. She was breathtaking, and for a moment Elias forgot how to speak. Does it feel strange? She asked quietly. He smiled faintly. Strange is an understatement. I've faced battleships, but this feels like walking into history. Lyra reached out, straightening a clasp on his armor. Her touch lingered, light but grounding. Then let's make history worth remembering. But before he could respond, a faint hum vibrated through the air, a sound no one else seemed to hear. His soldier's instincts flared. Something was wrong. Moments later, the ceremony began. The Queen stood upon the grand dais, her voice carrying over the gathered millions. Today, Aloria chooses unity over fear. Today we prove that light shared between worlds burns brighter than it ever could alone. Elias and Lyra stepped forward together, their hands joined, the crowd's glow reflecting in their eyes. The energy of the moment was almost sacred until the skies themselves screamed. A shadow cut across the twin suns. Then another. The crowd looked upward as black ships descended through the atmosphere. Earth designs, repainted with no insignia. The first missile struck the outer tower. The explosion rippled like thunder. Panic erupted. Guards shouted orders. Crystalline shards rained like molten glass. Lyra was thrown backward by the shockwave, but Elias caught her, shielding her with his body. Elias, the Queen cried, her voice echoing through the chaos. Get her to the lower halls, go! He dragged Lyra through collapsing corridors as more explosions shook the palace, the air filled with smoke and light. They're human ships, he shouted over the roar. But not military, mercenaries. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. Why would your people? They're not my people, he snapped, ducking as another blast tore through the ceiling. They're someone's puppets. They reached the council chambers, now cracked and burning. Outside, rebel forces, Varen's loyalists, had joined the assault, their weapons trained on the royal guards. Lyra grabbed Elias's arm. We have to find my mother. Before he could answer, A holographic feed flickered to life above them. Chancellor Varen's sneering face. Your Majesty's dream ends today. You brought a human into our hearts, and now your heart will burn for it. Lyra's breath caught as she watched the broadcast. He's in the central tower. Elias gritted his teeth. Then that's where we're going. They fought their way through smoke and wreckage. Elias's rifle blazed blue fire, his movements sharp and instinctive. Lyra fought beside him, her spear glowing brighter with every strike. The corridors pulsed with battle, machine against magic, chaos against courage. When they finally reached the central tower, the queen was cornered. Varen stood before her with a plasma blade, his eyes wild. You could have ruled forever, he hissed. But you chose weakness. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, firing. The shot struck Varen's weapon, sending it spinning across the floor. The Chancellor turned, snatching a sidearm. Too late, human, he roared, firing wildly. Elias took the hit once, twice. The armor absorbed most of it, but he fell hard, pain lancing through his ribs. Lyra screamed, her power flaring in a blinding surge of light. The vines embedded in the tower walls came alive, wrapping around Varen like chains of flame. He shouted, struggling, until the vines burned him into silence. When the light faded, Lyra dropped to her knees beside Elias. No. Please, no, he coughed, managing a weak grin. Still, not dead yet. The queen knelt beside them, her trembling hand brushing his shoulder. You saved us again, Captain. Elias looked between them, mother and daughter, royalty and heart, and whispered through the pain. I didn't save a crown. I saved you. Outside, the invader ships were retreating, their command gone. The skies of Aloria glowed red and gold, torn yet beautiful. As the queen's guards rushed in, Lyra pressed her forehead against Elias's. You're not allowed to leave me, she whispered fiercely. He smiled faintly. Then I guess I'll have to stay. And for the first time since the war ended, hope didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt alive, bleeding, and human. 3 weeks passed before the light returned to Aloria. The fires were gone, the smoke had thinned, and for the first time in a generation, the city's twin moons rose unbroken above the skyline. But scars remained, on walls, on hearts, and in the silence that followed too much loss. Elias woke to the soft hum of the medbay. His body ached like every bone was made of memory. When he tried to move, pain stabbed through his side, and he let out a low breath. You're awake, came a voice, gentle, familiar, trembling. Lyra stood at his bedside, her gown simple this time, her hair undone. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were brighter than ever. Guess I missed the rest of the war, Elias rasped, trying to smile. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You ended it. The queen entered then, her regal presence subdued but warm. Captain Ward, she said, her tone blending respect and affection. You've given more to Aloria than we could ever repay. Elias tried to sit up, but she raised a hand. Rest, the world can wait. He sank back, studying them both. What happened after? The traitors are gone, Seraphine said quietly. Varen's forces surrendered after his fall. The Earth Council denounced the mercenaries' actions. They've opened negotiations, real ones this time. Lyra smiled faintly. You've become a legend, Elias. The human who stood against two worlds and still chose compassion. He shook his head. I didn't do it for politics. The queen's eyes softened. No, you did it for love. For a moment, the word hung in the air. Delicate, dangerous, true. Lyra reached for his hand. The ceremony was destroyed, but my choice wasn't. I still want this union, not for peace, not for history, but because of who you are. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but sincerity. When the sky burned, I didn't think of the crown. I thought of you. Elias's throat tightened. He looked into her violet eyes and felt the weight of every battle, every scar melt into something wordless. Then maybe, he said softly, it's time the universe learned what love between worlds really looks like. Seraphine smiled, a weary, beautiful smile that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. Then let us finish what was begun, not with spectacle, but truth. And so under the silver moons and the rising dawn, the queen herself presided over the quietest, most sacred union Aloria had ever known. No crowds, no banners, no political speeches. Just a human soldier and an alien princess standing in the Garden of Light where their story began. Lyra placed her palm against his chest, where his heart beat slow but steady. Do you promise to walk beside me even when the stars fade? Elias nodded, voice rough with emotion. And when the stars fall, I'll hold the sky with you. The queen whispered the ancient Elorian vow, her voice trembling. 2 worlds, 1 breath. 2 hearts, 1 courage. When their hands joined, the vines around them shimmered with living light. The garden bloomed brighter than it ever had, as if creation itself approved. For a while there was only silence, the peaceful kind this time. The kind born not of fear, but fulfillment. Afterward, as dawn washed the palace in gold, Elias stood with Lyra overlooking the horizon. The city below was alive again, children laughing, ships rebuilding, songs rising from the ruins. You changed us, Lyra said quietly. Not as a conqueror, not as a savior, just as a man who refused to give up. He smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Maybe that's what being human means, never stopping even when the universe tells you to. She rested her head against him. And maybe that's what being Elorian means, learning to trust what you can't understand. The wind stirred, carrying the sound of rebuilding, hammer against crystal, laughter against silence. Above them, the stars glittered like witnesses to a new beginning. Elias whispered, half to himself, half to the heavens, if humanity ever forgets why it fights, remind them of this day. Lyra smiled through tears, and if my people ever forget why they love, I'll remind them of you. The queen watched from the balcony behind them, her heart heavy with pride and hope. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Alliances rarely were. But for the first time in 1,000 years, she believed her daughter's world, and the human one, might finally walk the same path. As the suns rose higher, Elias took Lyra's hand once more. Their fingers intertwined easily, naturally, as though they'd always belonged that way. And in that moment, beneath the light of 2 suns and the promise of countless stars, human courage and alien grace became one story. Not a war story. Not a legend, a love story that healed a universe.